So today we're going to talk about Unit 3, which is retelling narrative stories. Unit 3 helps the students to take information from an existing story and organize it in a way that can help them write short stories, book reports, and critiques. Unit 3 is the first unit where every paragraph has a purpose. The information comes from asking questions and not from taking 3 words from each sentence. The students still will choose 3 words per line, including symbols and numbers, which are free, but they will not choose words from just one particular sentence. The students can use this unit with Aesop's fables, fairy tales, legends, any kind of short story works well. However, they can do it with any length story, but the shorter the story, the easier it is to plug in this information and not have too many characters or too complex of a plot. As your student does this, remember that the questions are a guide. They are not all important to answer every single time. The students can choose to answer some questions and not others, and they can choose to answer them in whatever order they choose. They can brainstorm different ways of writing their story. They can take the original story and change characters. They can change their character qualities. Maybe in the story it was a kind knight, and maybe the student wants them to be a fierce knight. That's okay. Remember that the story is fiction and your students' rewriting is also fiction. So let them have fun with it. Let them learn to enjoy writing and telling stories. So accept and encourage any variations to the plots or the characters that your student wants to do. Obviously, you're the parent and you're the teacher, so keep it within reason if they're being a little crazy. But just keep reminding yourself this is fiction and they're learning. So with the story sequence chart, there are 3 paragraphs, and you write it out like this. You write Roman numeral 1, characters and settings, Roman numeral 2, conflict or problem, and Roman numeral 3, climax and resolution. There are some synonyms to these words, and if you want to write them with the synonyms, that's fine. Like instead of resolution, maybe solution. That's totally fine, just as long as you're getting the idea. So in paragraph 1, the characters and the settings, the students will answer questions about who is in the story, what are they like, describe the characters, where does the story take place, when did it happen, where did the characters go, or where did they live. So these questions help to put almost like a once upon a time idea to their story. And remember that in this section, not all characters have to be introduced. If you're introducing a story, if you're writing a story about Cinderella, you might introduce Cinderella, her stepmother, her stepsisters in the beginning, but you may not introduce the fairy godmother till later in the story when we're talking about the conflict or the problem that she has. And you may not introduce the prince till later either, and that's okay. But allow the students to decide whether they think the characters need put in the first paragraph or later. If you want to introduce them, you can say in another part of the land there lived a prince. You don't have to make it awkward or just list them like Cinderella's here and the prince is this and the fairy godmother is that. It doesn't have to happen that way. It can flow a little bit more naturally. So in paragraph 2, though, we'll talk about the conflict or the problem. What does the character want? What do they need? What do they say? What do they think? What do they do? How are they trying to accomplish getting what they want? These questions help them draw out the problem and the problem that the main character encounters along the way and how he or she deals with it. So then paragraph 3 is the climax and the resolution. So how is their need solved? What happens after that? And what is the message, lesson, or moral of the story? So as you write I think sometimes the climax can be confusing, and IEW describes the climax as the point in the story where the rising action kind of stops, where there's a turning point. The action was rising, the problems were happening, and all of a sudden, right before it's solved, something happens which causes the story to take a turn. In literature, there's freedom, and different people can kind of see this slightly different, and they can put it in a different place. There's no exact right or wrong answer to where the climax lies. So it's okay for the students to vary in their the place where they put the climax of the story. So then after they fill out these lines with their 3 words and symbols or numbers, the last thing that they need to do is come up with a story clincher. The story clincher helps readers know that the story is finished. It's important to have a sentence at the end of the paper that wraps it all up. The students will use the story clincher to write a title. So they are going to write a sentence to finish the story, and they're going to take 2 or 3 words from that clincher sentence, and they're going to think of a title. So remember, as your students do this, they need to write the keyword outline on the story sequence chart, then they need to write a rough draft, and then they need to write a final draft. As the students are writing their rough draft or their final draft, if they look at their story sequence chart and they no longer want to make it a rainy day, but they want to make it a sunny day, that's okay. Think of the outline as a guide and not a hard and fast rule. So help them have fun with this, and it could be really fun to see the kind of stories that they come up with.